Okay, on the show today, I am happy and honored to welcome Betty Martin. So, Betty Martin is ex-chiropractor, but she's famous for the wheel of consent, working with intimacy, body work, all kinds of things, really, with interesting history. So, I've been hearing very good things about her for a number of years. My friend Adam Wilder in London recommended me her stuff a while back. I think it was sort of,
Oh, thanks.
Adam in London. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It was during the sort of Me Too kind of era, and we were talking about this and sort of saying, what should we learn about? And he was really recommending your stuff, Betty. And when I heard you were coming to the Embodiment conference, I was delighted. And I said, you know what, I would love to speak to Betty ahead of the conference. So 5 days out from the conference, a little bit crazy in my world, but I'm very
Yeah.
happy to take a break from that to talk to you today. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
let's hear a little bit about your history. Like, how did you get interested in this whole area?
Oh, boy, that's a good question. Well, in my mid 40s, I just turned 70 a few days ago. In my mid 40s, I took a workshop. It was after a divorce. I took a workshop in women's sexuality because I just thought, there's more out there. Like, there's something for me to learn. And was with the Body Electric School at the time, which was in 90 something. And um, I learned some things. And I learned, among other things, that my sexuality belonged to me, which seems really basic and really simple, but it hit me so hard at that workshop that it made me wonder, well, where did I think it was? Like, what was I thinking before? And I realized that as a female growing up in the 50s and 60s, my my sort of training was that my eroticism belonged to other people and that I was just supposed to respond to what other people wanted, mainly men, of course, at that time. Um, and discovering that it belonged to me was a huge revelation to me. And I mean, it sounds silly to say it right now, but it was. And it so and it was that experience was very body based. We had some experiences um, with movement and breath and touch, and we exchanged massages. And um, so one other thing that I learned was that though I had some idea of what spirituality was, you know, I figured I don't know what I just thought, yeah, it's like it's the beyond physical. And what I found was that at that workshop and experiences later that I continued to explore, what I found was that the more physical the experience, the more spiritual it felt. And when I say physical the experience, I mean the more I was able to completely give my attention to my sensation. Like, what does this feel like right here, right now? What's my skin feel like? What's my gut feel like? What's the impulse to move feel like? And the more I could attend to the physicality of it, the more spiritual it felt. And it completely changed my understanding of what spirituality is.
They're
Um,
normally put as almost opposite poles, aren't they? So
yeah,
in
yeah,
culture is
and
the physical, the material, and then the spiritual,
right,
the transcending of that, the opposite.
right. Yeah, no, I don't think that's true at all. I mean, I agree that that's what the common paradigm is, but it ceased to be true for me, um, and became uh, I at some point I learned that, or I realized that I thought, if it's not that some things are sacred and some things are not, it's that either everything is or nothing is. Um, so yeah, that was a big game changer for me. And anyway, so back to your question, I continued to explore with a handful of friends who'd also taken the workshop. And it really became a path of awareness for me for some years, my own eroticism. And really expanded my definition of what that meant and how to access it and how to use it and what it meant for me and how I experienced it was a full-on exploration for a number of years. And at some point, I realized I was interested in offering what I'd learned to other people. And so that's when I closed my chiropractic office and opened a different office or a studio to offer hands-on sessions with people, um, helping them learn how to notice what they want, ask for what they want, how to feel in their body, how to express themselves. And that was a lot of fun. Um, and of course, I learned a lot there too, because you work with a lot of people, you're going to see a lot of things. And so I learned a lot. And that's where the Wheel of Consent came from working with hundreds of people. Yeah.
Let's take the hundreds down to one or two individuals. Like, intuitively, as you remember back, was there anyone who stood out? We can change the names or whatever if need be, but like, give us an example of a case study or someone there that you went, this was John's journey or Sarah's journey.
Oh, that's a good one. One person that pops up is a person who was very socially awkward. He had what's the word? Not autism.
Asperger's or something.
Asperger's, yeah. Thank you. And he was severe enough that he had kind of trouble functioning in society. And he was about my age. He was in his 50s, and he wanted to learn how to have girlfriends. And so we started out. I start everyone out with a series of exercises and activities that help me assess where their current skill level is and where their current comfort level is. And so we did that a number of times. And so with him, it was a lot of skill building about noticing what he felt, getting comfortable asking for a hug, for example. Or one time he came in and he said, "I've heard of spooning. What's that?" And I said, "Oh, honey, I'll show you that." So we spooned and cuddled a bit, and it was a revelation for him. And those kinds of people are so fun and satisfying to work with, because when I say those kinds of people, I don't mean people with Asperger's. I mean people who are just learning and who have a certain innocence of like, what's this? How's that work? How do you do this? It's just so fun and satisfying. And I think, where else would they get that kind of experience? It's not something that you want to go on a date and ask your date to teach you, or it's not something that you are going to feel comfortable doing on a date anyway. But having someone who's a professional that you can go to that's going to guide you through these experiences. Yeah, that was really fun.
Now, there's something about most of us are in these skills. My sense is we're sort of mostly incompetent, but we've sort of bumbled along and learned a little bit somehow.
That's true.
And the same with all these skills. And the fact that you call them skills jumped out at me, because some people, intimacy is just, you're supposed to know it. What do you mean skill, Betty?
Yeah.
Let's that a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The assumption is it's supposed to be natural. You're supposed to know how. Well, what the heck? Like, there's no other skill that we are supposed to intuitively know how to do, except maybe swallow, or
blink. That's about it.
Yeah.
You have to learn to cook. You have to learn to get dressed and stuff. I mean, it's just this thing.
Yeah. And intimacy, which is a big word that deserves some defining. because when you say intimacy, you're going to have a different movie in your head than the next person has in their head.
Nice.
But what I mean is relating to someone in a way that you enjoy and makes you feel closer. Let's define it that way for the moment. Um, of course, there are skills. There are skills in reading the response of the other person so that you don't uh,
Yeah, mistakes there.
walk right over them or make a fool of yourself. Either one. There's the skill of knowing, of noticing in your body what is actually your impulse and what is it that you actually want, what actually sounds wonderful, what am I a no to, what am I a hell no to, and what am I a, well, I don't know, maybe let's talk about it. So those are all skills, and people tend to focus on the doing skills, what to do with my hand, how, what am I supposed to do with this body part with this other body part, and how are they supposed to fit together. But that's really not the kind of skill that makes for great relating or great sex. It's the noticing and communicating. Those are the real skills that make a difference.
So let's break it down, because I'm a little bit of a geek generally, and especially around embodiment.
Yeah.
So the skills, there's noticing like, hey, am I horny? Hey, do I want to be close to this person? Hey, do I find that yucky?
Mm-hmm.
There can be a gap, right? Like sometimes my head is saying, yeah, it's time to have sex, and my body's actually going, no, not right now, or
Mm-hmm.
not with this person, or not in this way. So there's that seems to be the most primary skill, is noticing in oneself, right?
Notice it, yes, absolutely. And I would expand that. Um, Very often, because of the way our culture is so weird around touch and desire and sex, very often when we say, well, I'm horny, I want sex, what we really want may be something else. It may be, I want connection, I want affirmation, I want fun, I want to feel like, I want to be reassured that I'm a good person, I want touch and safety,
Mm-hmm.
I want adventure, I want to experiment. So those things are not necessarily about sex, but because we don't have much other way in our culture to do those things, they get laid on top of sex. And then every little impulse that comes along, you think it's about sex.
Right.
When it really may be that what you want is some affirmation that you're a good person. And
Yeah. It seems particularly with men, I found that they're not necessarily, it seems like they're not getting those needs met other places, and
that's, yeah, I think that's true.
and I really recommend everyone have a period of celibacy, even if it's a day or a week or a month. I did 40 days. And it was really interesting, because I was like, okay, so my commitment for 40 days is not to have deliberate physical sexual activity.
Yeah.
But I said, I can still get my touch needs met. I hugged my wife throughout the whole 40 days, and I can still get play needs met, and I can still get intimacy needs met.
Yeah.
And I actually found out, I thought it was going to be like, white knuckle ride. Can I manage 40 days? Oh my God, this is going to be tough. And I mean, aside from having slightly blue balls after a couple of weeks, it was actually relatively straightforward.
Oh, hell yeah.
Because it was like, I'm still getting 9 of the 10 needs met that I must get met generally in one package, It was far easier than I thought because of that.
Yeah. I think that's especially true for men in our culture.
Yeah. I remember being jealous as a teenage boy when I looked at teenage girls and they would compliment each other and touch each other and be meeting all these needs with each other, and and that was not my experience with my guy friends as a teenager.
Yeah, that's.
I didn't even realize it was a thing until I got female friends. And it was like, nice to each other. Wow.
Now that's an idea.
So you got interested in these skills, and so there's the self skills, and then there's the noticing in the others, right? Like, not just riding roughshod over people. There's some idea. Right. Hey, yeah, she's my wife. Yeah, she normally fancies me, but right now doesn't seem that way. Or she's tired, or okay, right now she's in a mood for this that's slightly different from normal. That listening seems the other side of the coin.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to imply that you're supposed to read the other person's mind.
Mm.
It's that I have never found that to work very well, although I sure the heck tried in my day. I tried in both directions and I could not get it to work.
Mentally
Get my
implanting,
man to read my
please
mind.
go down on me, mentally implanting the idea. Okay. And
Yeah,
as you say, like that's a recipe for misery, isn't it? And
yeah, it
sometimes
is.
we make these jokes, and it's like, so you made an agreement in your head with me, and I didn't keep it. Now you're angry. I see the problem here. You know, like I can see you
That's a
made the
great
agreement with the
description.
imaginary me, and the real me didn't know about it. So okay,
Yeah,
no wonder you're pissed off.
yeah, that's I'm totally guilty of that. Yeah.
Why are we so screwed up about this, Betty? Like, why are we making magical agreements in our head and not asking for what we want and not saying no? I mean, is it just how we're conditioned? Is it just
Oh, sure. Well, it's just hard to ask for what you want. I mean, it's just hard. For one thing, when we're small, we get told that we're not supposed to. I mean, look at what when we're about 2 years old, our brain develops enough to notice that we are a separate being from our parents.
yeah,
And the sign of that is that we learn how to say no.
yeah,
And we,
terrible
we
news,
get
man.
really good at it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what do we call that? The terrible twos. Like, who gets told as a kid, oh, Susie, I can't give you what you're asking for, but you sure do a great job of asking for it. Yeah, no, I don't.
People
I've
get
never known
criticized
anyone to say
for it. I'm coming across this in a work context now, Betty.
that. Hmm.
We're really working hard on the embodiment conference, and everyone's at capacity, and it's
Hmm.
really difficult to get people to say no. Like a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
of
I
the teams
imagine.
keep saying yes and then dropping balls or being overwhelmed and having
Yeah,
breakdowns, and I'm like, are you sure you can do this?
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
But there's just so much conditioning
yeah,
to
yeah,
not like, what do you need? And it turned out that someone, for example, on the team was really broke and they were really worried, and I'm like, I can lend you 5 grand. What are you
yeah,
doing? Cash flow's good. Just 5 grand, man. Just chill. Like,
yeah,
no worries, you'll pay me back. I know where you live. And but
yeah,
they couldn't ask for it.
yeah, sure. It's just hard. And it's inherently vulnerable to ask.
I'm not sure
It's,
I get
well,
this.
because when I ask you for something, then my desire is out there in the world visible. Well, you could say no, of course. You could make fun of it. You could laugh at me. You could say, what the hell? What are you asking for that for? I mean, any number of things could happen. So it's inherently vulnerable to have our desires exposed. And not because there's anything wrong with them. It's just like that's the nature of it.
And I guess we have all had that experience of saying that something, hey, would you do this, and being mocked,
Oh,
being
sure. Yeah, yeah,
as a guy, often it's
yeah,
like, ew. Like I've asked a girl out and seen her just recoil in disgust.
yeah. Ugh.
The first
Yeah,
time that happens, you're like, I'm never asking a girl out.
yeah, sure. Well,
No.
and the thing of it is that it happens before we can talk. It happens very early in life that we get shamed and humiliated for asking, for wanting things. So it's I think the fact that it happens so early is why it's so deep. Your question before of why is it so hard, and then we grow up and it doesn't seem to get any better. So if we're really lucky, we have experiences in which it works well.
I think I've been
And
quite
if we're
lucky.
not so lucky, we don't.
I've definitely been lucky with asking. Someone
Yeah.
asked me, how did you put the embodiment conference together? How did you get 1,000 amazing speakers? I said, I asked them and they said yes.
Mhm.
Like literally that was it, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that's the key skill for building a business, for being a manager.
Yeah.
You call it delegating if you're a manager, right?
Yeah.
But it's just asking people stuff. It's remarkably simple, really.
Yeah. Yes, it
Some
is.
said no, that was okay. Some said go away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the skill set, self-awareness, tuning into others, not being
Hmm.
psychic, but having some awareness.
Mm-hmm.
We gotta ask for what we want. If I was like mapping, if I was like a Dungeons and Dragons character,
Mm-hmm.
like a top trumps card, these would be like level 7 asking for what you want, level 3.
Yeah.
What other skill sets would be on the top trumps? You know what a top trumps card is? Do you
Yeah.
have it?
No, I've never played D&D, but my kids have.
It's like strength 8, agility 7, this kind of thing.
Oh,
What
yeah,
would
yeah.
this is such a geeky way of looking at it, but I love it. What would be the
I
other
can relate.
the intimacy Dungeons and Dragons character?
uh, I think another skill would be knowing how to continue the conversation. It's more than, do you want to do X, yeah or no?
Right.
So expanding the conversation, or you could think of it as negotiating. With some people, that word scares them, but it's really quite easy. It's like, can you come over and help me, you know, move my piano? Yeah, not this week, but I come next week. Okay, cool. That's negotiation.
Counter offer. Yeah, so
So
linguistically, there's only like yes, no,
yeah,
and a counter offer. That's pretty much it, right?
yeah.
Oh.
So extending the conversation looks like, oh, I'm kind of interested in this. Are you? Well, kind of, but I think of it more this way. Oh, that's interesting. Never thought of that. Well, how about adding this to it? Yeah, that sounds good. And this is a concern that I have. If I get scared or whatever, I'll need to stop. And okay, that sounds good. What would you like me to notice so that I can stop when you want me to stop? And
Oh, that's great. That's great.
it's a really, you have to be a grown up to. Well, I hate to say it that way because that sounds like you're a problem if you don't. And we're all somewhere learning these skills. But when I say you have to be a grown up, what I mean is you have to be willing to do things that are a little scary for you, and that's part of what we do. Yeah, and usually the way to learn that is that you start out fairly simple and fairly small, and the idea of asking for this big elaborate fantasy role play with whips and ropes and stuff and negotiating, like that's a huge project to have a conversation.
Start simple, right? Like break it down, right?
But you could ask for, hey, will you rub my back for 5 minutes?
Uh-huh.
And would you dig your elbow in there at that spot? So starting with something that's smaller and simpler, number one, lets you learn the skills, and number two, lets you learn to trust that the other person is going to treat you respectfully when you ask.
Yeah, I think
it's usually easier to learn and not in a terribly sexy or not in a turned on situation.
I was in a beginner's workshop of your work run by our mutual friend Adam, and I think he started with something like, your forearm. You can only touch the forearm. Okay, so it's a public place. You're fully dressed, and it's what do you want to do to my forearm? What do I want done to my forearm? And this kind of puts into the whole wheel of consent, right?
Yeah.
Simple beginners, and realizing the profound thing for me in that workshop was: is this for me or is this for her?
Exactly, which is what the wheel of consent is all about.
So it's kind of easier to see. So I would recommend everyone Google Wheel of Consent, Betty Martin. But talk it through for those who are maybe walking along the street or on the subway and they can't Google it right now. Like, talk us through it.
So when you are touching me, are you doing what you want or are you doing what I want? And the difference is significant. And a lot of people will think, well, if I'm doing what I want, gosh, that's terrible. That's the wrong thing to do. No, it's the right thing to do if that's what our agreement is. Right. So I can ask you, how would you like me to touch you? And you say, well, would you rub my shoulders, or would you tickle my foot, or would you scratch my head, or whatever? And then I can agree with that, or we can negotiate, and then we do it. So because you have asked for it, it's for you, and I'm doing what you want, and I'm doing it as best I can in the way that you want, and I'm checking in with you. Is this the way you want? How's the pressure? So it's all about you. That's one dynamic. The other dynamic is, may I play with your hair? May I feel your back? May I hold your hand? May I, feel your arms? May I kiss your ears or something? In that case, I'm asking for permission to do the thing that I want. And it's about me. It's not about you. You might enjoy it. Terrific. That's a bonus. But I'm not here to please you. I'm here to please me. And I'm checking in with you, and I'm respecting your limits. If you say, "Ooh, that tickles, don't do that," then I'm going to stop, of course. But ultimately, my attention is on my own pleasure and my own sensation. So if I'm feeling your arm, I might be enjoying the shape of it, the texture, the warmth, the texture of the hairs on your arm, whatever. So it's all about me. So those are the two different dynamics. And so, as you said a minute ago, who's it for becomes the big question. My hand is on your back. I can look, someone could look through the window and see my hand stroking down your back. They could tell who was doing, who's me, but they couldn't tell who it's for because they don't know what the agreement was. And it may make a difference because if my hand is going where you want, it's going to go where you want. If it's going where I want, it's going to go where I want. And at some point, those two will differ. So the wheel of consent does is distinguish between those two different dynamics. I'm doing what you want, or I'm doing what I want, and what's the difference? And of course, the reverse, you're doing what you want, or you're doing what I want.
Yeah.
And so when I'm doing to you what I want, I'm feeling you up, I'm playing with your hair, I'm the one doing, but I'm not giving. I'm actually receiving a gift. I'm receiving the gift of being allowed to do what I want. So that sort of throws a wrench in how most people think of what giving and receiving means. So if giving doesn't mean doing, what does it mean? And how I've come to define it is that receiving and giving is not about who's doing, it's about who it's for. I can receive a gift of you touching me the way I want. I can receive a gift of being allowed to touch you the way I want, which is still a gift.
So this creates almost like 4 quadrants, right? So we've got.
So this creates 4 quadrants. Yeah.
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 Do you want to take us through each of those quadrants? Again, I really recommend people Google this. I have. Yeah. It's reminded of it, but it's easier visually. But take us through those 4 quadrants again.
Yeah. The quadrants are, I'm doing what you want, which I call serve, or I'm doing what I want, which is called take. Taking is an odd word for most people, but I couldn't find another word that worked for that. You can think of it as like, hey, there's a pie on the table, take it home. That taking means it's a gift for me, from you, freely given with a full heart, but I take action to collect the gift. It's like the difference between if you pick the pears on the tree in your yard and bring them over to me, or you can say, come pick all the pears you want, and then I come over and pick the pears. It's still a gift, but I'm taking the action to collect it. So that's 2 quadrants. Serve, I'm doing what you want. Take, I'm doing what I want. In allow, I'm allowing you to do what you want. So this is the opposite, or the pair that goes with taking, is allowing. And again, I am respecting my own limits and boundaries. I'm not going to let you do something that is unpleasant or that's not okay with me. It's not about what I want, but it is about what I'm okay with. And then the one that pairs with the serving quadrant is accepting. And again, this word is kind of problematic for some people because one of the meanings is that you just accept your lot in life, you accept whatever's coming your way, and you figure out, well, okay, I have to accept it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, oh, you have a gift for me and I accept it. Hell yeah, I'd love to have that. That's what I think of accepting.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And yeah, and accepting means I have asked you to touch me in this way, and you're doing that exactly that way as I have asked because it's for me. So the reason it creates quadrants is because there's a doing half and a done to half. And then bisecting that, there's a it's for you or it's for me half. And so they overlap.
Do you think people have sort of characterological kind of leanings here? Like I've definitely met, had partners who were much more on the wanting to serve, partners who were much more on that, hey, you know what, just do whatever you enjoy. And other partners like, I want this,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Do you think it's sort of some characterological things we might kind of, end up with partners where we kind of tessellate a little bit there?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's totally fine to have a favorite quadrant, and many of us do. But if there's a quadrant that you can't access, like you just it's too scary for you, which usually happens in the receiving half, either receiving the gift of you doing what I asked you to do or receiving the gift of you letting me do what I want to do. Those tend to be harder for people. And if you can't go there because it's just too scary, it doesn't mean that the other one is your favorite. It just means that you're scared of that one. So I do think it's fine for people to have favorites, and favorites only applies when you actually can access all of them. And I believe that to have a really full and mature eroticism that is liberating, we need to be able to access all four of them.
Some humanity in all of them, right? Some part of our being.
Absolutely. Everyone, each one of them is inherent to being a human being. There are times when we want to do what we want to do, by golly, and there are times when we're willing to do what someone else wants us to do. Both of those are really important to have in our lives.
Yeah, it's it, and there's something like I guess take the leadership context again. If someone can't follow, there's something lost in that, right? If they can't step up to lead, at least sometimes, there's a problem in that. And all of them can be a consent, right? So this
oh, absolutely, they happen only with consent.
Someone told me the worst possible option. Maybe the worst option actually is the taking without permission, right? Abuse. But someone told me there's another really bad option which made me laugh, which is serving, thinking you're serving, but them actually tolerating it. Like, oh, she's gonna love this, and you're going, I'm not really into it, but I bet she'll like it. And she's going, well, I'm not really into it, but it seems like it's what he wants. So neither party's winning. That's like the lose-lose.
Yes. Yeah. I'd say both are willing, but neither of them are getting what they want. Yeah, absolutely. And whenever I tell that story, pretty much every head in the audience nods like, yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
It goes for years. I mean, I've had partners like years later have gone,
oh yeah,
no, I'm a bit tired. I'm not going to do that normal thing tonight. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm not really into that anyway. And then you suddenly realize,
wait a minute, I've been doing that for you for all these years.
Yes, and you never, what? And all of a sudden it's like you're freed from this kind of situation that you was that into.
Yeah, that's it's sadly very common. And the wheel of consent really is a practice. It's a model of what, how different dynamics work, but it's also a practice. Like So it's not that I want to spend all my life in every interaction specifically saying who it's for. It's not necessary. But when but when I have experiences in which I am strict about who it's for, and I really know it's for me, or I really know it's for you because we've communicated about it, then experiences are possible that are possible no other way. Like having you touch me exactly the way I want, that's all about me, and I'm not giving anything back for this period of time that we've agreed on, is life changing. It's phenomenal. Do I want to live my whole life like that? No. But to have that period of time where I am completely in charge and you're going to do exactly what I want, that's life changing. And the same for each of the other dynamics, that there are experiences that are possible there that are possible no other way. And that's where it gets really deep and really gorgeous. And then you take what you've learned there back into your playtime and however you want to. Um, so it's a practice.
Do you get any kind of pushback about this? I kind of imagine something like, why do you make it all breaking it down? And actually, there's a flow here, and do we need to dissect it? Like, you know what I mean? Like, is there any kind of
Yeah,
pushback like that you get?
sure. I say, well, okay, don't try it. Like, I don't care. um, but that's why I say it's a practice, because when you consciously agree to practice it, okay, let's try this. How do you want me to touch you for 5 minutes or whatever? There are things that you learn there that you don't learn any other way. And then you take what you learn and you go back to your free flow play,
It clarifies, right?
and it clarifies it.
It's pure in
Yeah,
a way,
yeah,
like a
yeah,
sort of sexual vipassana. Like
yeah,
if you're sitting
yeah,
meditating, there's a thought, there's a
right,
sensation, there's an
yeah,
emotion, and you
yeah,
break it down, and then when it all comes back together again, it's all much clearer. So
yes,
that's it.
yeah,
Almost it's like separating out into sort of the pure parts to examine
yeah,
it, to work on it, to develop it.
yeah. And because it is fun. I mean, they're just like, if you're doing exactly what I want you to do, hell yeah, I'm going to have fun with that. And if I'm doing exactly what you want me to do, that's going to be fun too, probably. So, um, but yeah, so it's not that I'm trying to get you to live your whole life this way. I'm saying experiment with it and see what you find. Um, and yeah, it's not for everybody. Not everyone's interested. That's okay. That doesn't bother me.
I mean, we need to wrap up fairly soon. Unfortunately, I feel like we're just beginning here. But how is it to have a life going around teaching this stuff? I mean, before COVID, I'm sure you're doing
Before COVID,
workshops. You
it's
do,
great.
yeah.
It's great. I first started teaching other practitioners, mainly sex workers, probably 15 years ago. And um, and I would teach like a 2-day thing. The wheel of consent took about an hour on Saturday afternoon. It was very minor. Um, and the more I taught it, the more I realized how useful it was. I didn't quite understand it at first. I mean, I thought, well, here's this cool thing, whatever. But people's response to it showed me, oh, this is really useful to people. And so then the wheel of consent gradually expanded to take up the whole workshop. And then I was teaching 3 days, and then, we need 4 days, and now it's a 5-day workshop. And it's pretty much all on the wheel of consent, plus some assessment protocols. Um, because um, because the more I've worked with it, the more I've seen how universal it is, and the ahas that come up for people. That's what keeps me going. Like, the ahas that come up for people. that are completely a surprise them, as they're going through these experiences. Um, that's endlessly fascinating. And it's very satisfying, of course, to offer something that is useful for people. And
Nice.
it's very fun.
Yeah, fun and useful. That's a good combo.
Yeah.
How have you mean the world has really changed around this topic in the last 5 years, let alone the last 70 years? It seems like consent's much more on the radar. Like in the yoga world, it's much bigger than it was. It's coming to the martial arts world finally. In trauma world, it's the trauma informed stuff has been there. The sort of politicized kind of conversations around sexual violence and sexual consent. There's definitely a generational difference. Consent conversations, I'm really seeing, young people have a completely different attitude towards it. There's potentially excesses there, or I've seen it almost, maybe it's a growth process, sort of people establishing boundaries in a very clumsy way of, for example, sort of cutting off all contact. I no longer wish to Facebook you. You said something on Facebook I don't like, therefore you're out of my life permanently, forever. This kind of almost over assertion of boundaries I'm seeing come into play. Really? Well, that's it? Never text you again because of that? Wow. Okay. Right. Yeah. How is it like the modern to be teaching this work in this new era?
That's a good question. Well, teaching this in the last 15 years, what I've noticed is that we have become more aware of and developed more nuance and more respect for the role of trauma and the freeze response, and just being unable to say no or unable to say stop and that sort of stuff. And I wasn't as aware of that 15 years ago as I am now. And you may feel that somebody's saying, okay, I'm going to unfriend you because you said something mean on Facebook, but that may seem excessive. And it's absolutely everyone's right to say, I don't want to interact with you. Absolutely. And for many of us, learning that we have that right is a revelation. And so, are we going to exercise that right? Hell yes. So, yeah, I think everyone has the right to say no. And no is a complete sentence. We don't need to explain it.
I think there's something else. So there is, of course, the right to say no, the right to end any kind of relationship, sexual, professional, whatever it is. Isn't there also something, though, about sort of the dignity or the respect to the history? So, for example, if someone's, been a friend of mine for 10 years and, is a text message to say, never contact me again, really the way to go? Like, this strikes me, well, they have that right. They're still being a shitty human being.
Yeah. If I was friends with somebody for 10 years, I would want more of a conversation to end it. Sure, naturally. But what happens when people, so if I've grown up my whole life not knowing that it's okay to have boundaries, which is true for many, many women. I'm sure it's true for some men as well, but it's kind of endemic for women, not knowing that it's okay to say no or have boundaries. And then I have an experience which shows me, or I gradually learned that, oh my God, it is okay to have boundaries. Holy shit, I never knew that. Creating boundaries and setting limits is a skill, just like any other skill. And so there's going to be times when I'm clumsy at it, of course.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing on a societal level.
So
women, men too. I'm seeing that on a societal level, like we're almost learning boundaries and maybe overshooting or overcooking or as I said, it's like a new skill for so many people it's a learning curve, right?
Yes. And if I'm learning to have boundaries and I learn that no is a complete sentence, and I just tell you, you know what? I've been putting up with this shit for all these years, and I haven't noticed that before now. how this person is being rude to me or taking advantage of me. I just didn't notice it. And now I notice it. So now I'm going to say no. And um, it's nice to get an explanation, but it's not necessary. Nobody
No, I
owes you
disagree with
that.
you here. Civility is necessary. I
Yeah,
disagree with you. No is not a complete sentence. No
yeah,
plus civility is complete. And I feel like that basic respect and civility for each other is what is starting to be lacking in this. So this is where I would disagree with you.
yeah. Oh, I
I'm
hear
trying to
that.
articulate something that's been bugging me because I've been a
Yeah,
big supporter of no and
yeah,
boundaries and
yeah.
I've literally the last 2 years I've seen something else come in and I'm like, what is that? It feels like there's a balancing piece which has been forgotten.
Well, civility, I would agree. Civility is great.
It's
And
necessary, not
well,
just great.
yeah,
We're
there
going to
are
say we don't
times.
owe anyone anything. Do we? I think we do, in assuming an absence of violence, right? We do owe each other something.
Yeah, and what's violence? I mean, is violence just a club to the head, or is it, verbal violence, or is it, I mean, there are times when we just have to shut people out of our lives. It's awful, but it's necessary sometimes. And as much as they would like for us to be civil, there are times to just say, nope, that's it.
I
I'm
agree
done.
with you. There are those times. I
Yeah,
agree with you.
yeah,
I
yeah.
see a sliding scale.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. There's a sliding scale. And where any individual situation sits on that sliding scale, who the fuck knows? I sure don't know. I mean, I have a hard enough time knowing my own scale. I'm sure not going to sit in judgment of somebody else's scale.
Mm.
Um, you know,
Juicy. We do need to wrap
yeah.
up. I'm going to take a tiny break. So
Yeah,
juicy. So much to get into. Betty, I
juicy.
love it. I love it. Okay. Do really appreciate your work. I do recommend it to people. I would say anyone out there to learn to say no and to learn to ask for what you want are just key life skills. And
Yeah,
you can, need a safe container to do that, like a workshop where things are really well structured and well boundaried. I, really
yeah,
recommend that to people.
yeah.
Where do people find
Great.
you online, Betty? Where do they go to?
BettyMartin.org.
bettymartin.org, and really do Google what we're talking about. It's so much clearer
And
when you can see.
on the website, there's a bunch of free videos about the Wheel of Consent and some free things you can download and a bunch of free stuff. Yeah.
Betty, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast.
You
I
are
look forward
so
to your session
welcome.
at the conference too.
Thank you. I enjoyed chatting.